On. Oh, hey, you just caught me in the middle of something. 1 second.
One
Wait,
enemy
wait.
remaining. One enemy remaining.
Yes!
Let's go. Oh, sorry about that. I was just playing some Valorant. Yeah. I first started playing during the peak of COVID-19. Sorry, what do you mean you don't know what COVID is? You just got out of a 5-year long coma, and this video is the first thing you're watching? All right, suit yourself. Let me tell you how online gaming served as a form of activity and community building during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially for those isolated by lockdowns. It all started in March of 2020. There was news of a outbreak of the COVID-19 epidemic where COVID stood for coronavirus disease. All around the world, societies were going into lockdown for what was supposed to be a couple of weeks. I vividly remember hearing the news on the loudspeaker of my high school, and my friends and I were ecstatic about the idea of a 2-week break. Then, the 2 weeks passed, and things weren't better. Week 3, no better. Week 4, no better. What was supposed to be a 2-week quarantine turned into a societal shutdown for over a year. That meant no in-person schooling, no sports, no hanging out with friends, no social gatherings in general. Literally everything, from school to church services to social gatherings, had to be shifted online due to the stay-at-home order, and gaming was no different. According to a scholarly journal posted on SagePub by T.T. Bankson, Louis H. Baum, and Lars Finbo, which focuses on the effect of online gaming during the pandemic in Denmark, gaming has been one of the few industries with a higher growth rate during the COVID-19 pandemic, and one report finds that the pandemic has had two key effects on gaming. A worldwide increase in money and time spent on gaming, and B, a transition towards multiplayer games and streaming. Furthermore, preliminary analysis of data trends during COVID-19 show how the number of concurrent users on platforms like Steam and in-game increased rapidly in the wake of COVID-19. Now that we've established how big gaming was during the pandemic, I think it's most fair to address its impact in two key ways. With how long lockdowns were in place, people were bound to get bored, and this is where online gaming came in as a form of entertainment and activity. Being stuck in our own homes meant that everything was done in one place. Eating, showering, schoolwork, job work, leisure, cooking, socializing, transportation, all of these things that would take place across our cities was now either gone or happening exclusively in our own homes. The lines that made each activity distinct began to fade away, to the point where everything felt monotonous. In this situation, what better way to escape our homes than to start an adventure in a virtual world separate from our own? Washington Post wrote an article in 2021 where each staff member wrote a little excerpt about how gaming altered their lives during COVID. And senior editor Brian Cleveland explained it this way. At the start of the pandemic, I was in the middle of playing The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo Switch. I found myself not really pursuing the main story or side quests so much as just wandering around the game's land of Hyrule. I finally realized it was because it felt like being outdoors in a way that was refreshing while I was cooped up in my apartment. Claustrophobic nature of the lockdowns was a serious factor in the mental health for a lot of people, so it's easy to understand how something like this would help relieve stress and allow people to explore outside of their homes, even if the exploration was simply in a virtual world. Gaming was more than a means of escapism, however, as it was able to provide a wide variety of entertainment and meaning to people depending on what they were looking for. Referring back to that scholarly journal, what I found quite interesting was the typical use cases depending on the gender of the player. Women typically played single-player games to relax, most often on mobile phones, while men predominantly played on PCs and consoles and preferred competitive multiplayer experiences. Obviously, this wasn't the case for every person in those genders, but it does demonstrate how people were able to experience gaming in just many different ways that suited their needs individually. One example of this that I vividly remember during COVID was when Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez visited people's islands on Animal Crossing and played Among Us on Twitch alongside many popular streamers. It just went to show how big gaming was during COVID and how it was able to provide meaning for people in a variety of different ways. Social life was probably the most difficult transition for people to make during the pandemic. Maintaining pre-existing friendships was a very difficult task since there was no way to hang out in person. The swap from in-person gatherings to virtual ones was a huge shift, and gaming was a huge proponent in how these connections were maintained. Although online gaming had existed before, during the pandemic it became the only option for most people. Washington Post business reporter Hamza Shaban wrote his excerpt on this idea of maintaining friendships during COVID through the use of online gaming, and he explained it in this way. Party chats have always been a kind of sanctuary, but they were especially useful during the pandemic. In the early months of staying at home, the Halo 5 lobby was my accidental and beloved hangout. A close friend who lives in Orlando with his wife and 2 kids would text, "Halo?" when their little ones were asleep, and we'd sign into our Xbox Ones. It wasn't as tedious or forced as a Zoom call, and putting on a headset and staring at floating spaceships seemed more exciting than a phone chat. We'd play a quick game or two before backing out and just settling into the menu screen to catch up in the real world as soaring instrumental music played in the background. Our wives would drop in and say hello, and after venturing through our personal lives, baby antics, the happenings of our younger brothers, and bizarre anecdotes about our parents, we'd jump into some 4v4 Slayer mode and do our worst. In this way, at least, we found a bit of familiarity in our new normal. As Shaban explained, online gaming was a way for people to spend quality time with one another in a natural and entertaining way. They didn't need to schedule a Zoom meeting or a phone call in order to spend time together. They could just spontaneously jump into an online game and play together while catching up on each other's lives. While online gaming allowed people to maintain their friendships during the lockdowns, it also gave the opportunity for people to make new friends. Discord in particular was a platform released in 2015 that allowed gamers to join servers where they could discuss their favorite video games or other forms of media, although it did direct more of its focus towards gaming. Discord exploded in popularity during the pandemic, as shown by Business of Apps, which had a page full of the year-by-year statistics for the platform. I compiled all of the data from the page into a graph format, and it's really shocking to see the explosive growth of the app from 2019 to 2020 in all of the following metrics. Monthly users, which was by per million users, annual revenue per $1 million, and company value per $1 billion. The growth during the time when the pandemic was at its peak shows how common it was for people to be downloading Discord to make new friends through gaming. Noah, a 15-year-old from Denmark who was interviewed for the Scholarly Journal, said this about new friendships built through online gaming. The friendships you create through gaming are friendships that don't depend on you seeing each other all the time, but where it's enough to just talk. But just because gaming doesn't require you to be together physically, it doesn't mean that those friendships aren't legitimate. They're just structured in ways that do not depend on physical contact. You're fine by not being together. What Noah's trying to say is that the friendships built through online gaming are unique in the sense that they are started as online friendships. Unlike pre-existing friendships from before the pandemic, these friendships were built around online gaming, and therefore they're associated with that activity instead of a physical interaction that takes place in person. If you know someone in real life, and you guys play baseball together, but that activity can't happen anymore, you might drift away from that person during a lockdown where no baseball is taking place. In these online friendships, however, you're perfectly fine with not seeing them because you never have seen them. It's easy to just hop into a game and chat with one another because that's how the friendship began. Neither of these friendships are any more or less legitimate than one another, but they're just structured in different ways, and that second form of friendship is something that online gaming provided people during the pandemic. Personally, online gaming was everything to me during the pandemic. Growing up, most of my relationships were built on in-person interactions as well as couch co-op on the Nintendo Wii during the family gatherings. When COVID struck and the lockdowns were set in place, all of my friends and family just felt distant because there was nothing we could do together. And I wasn't very fond of the idea of calling them just to talk about how bad things were. I didn't have many ways to spend time with people until I got my first computer, which changed my life entirely. I was able to play games with my cousins and make new friends along the way. One of the biggest shifts for me during the COVID pandemic was the Valorant team that I created, which led me to meeting some of my best friends who I still talk to today. I wouldn't go so far as to say the pandemic was an enjoyable experience, but it definitely changed my life for the better. In closing, online gaming was undoubtedly one of the most impactful forms of relief during the pandemic. It allowed us to escape the dreadful world that we lived in, while also fulfilling the needs of whoever was playing, whether it was a gateway for competition or relaxation. Online gaming was a means to strengthen pre-existing friendships, despite the long distance, and it provided the opportunity for people to meet others who were in a similar situation and who enjoyed the same games. The COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns were one of the darkest periods in recent memory. But thankfully, gaming was there for us, even when the world wasn't. Thanks for watching.